Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast with Benji Naesen. Today we're going to be talking about Team Ineos, having a quick review of what they did in 2020, reviewing their transfers in and out, as well as our preview for who they should be taking to the Grand Tours and the Monuments in 2021. I already am forgetting that we're in 2021. I still think we're in 2020 for some reason. Benji's tried to start a war between me and Ireland on Twitter. Go and check that out if you're interested to see what he posted, unbeknownst to me. But Benji, what do you make of Ineos next year? Just your 10-second, or if someone had to put you on the spot for 15 seconds, what would you say about Ineos in 2021? What would you expect from them?
They're going to try and take revenge in the Tour de France. That's something they need to do after 2020. They have a team with more GC leaders, which might make it harder regarding choosing the actual leader. But I think that despite having so much experience in the GC riders as well, that one of the riders that might go for the GC that we didn't see at his ultimate peak in 2020, Sivakov, might actually be the rider that I expect the most of.
So their transfers going into 2021, Chris Froome, most notably, we've spoken about this, everyone's spoken about this, he's gone over to Israel Startup Nation. I don't think, it's strange to say for a guy that's won all those Grand Tours and races and done everything he has done for Ineos. I don't think Ineos are going to miss him, and I don't think Ineos are concerned that Froome's gone over to ISU. Otherwise, they would have re-signed him. And so far, their decision not to re-sign him is looking like a good one so far. And the three others that left Ineos were retirements. So Kirienka and Christian Nies, the German, they retired probably when they wanted to retire at the end of their careers. But also Ian Stannard retired early, I would say. He was early 30s. I think he would have still preferred to have ridden for a few more years, but he had like chronic arthritis, I think, in his knees or something. The same thing Jack Bobridge had, actually, and that caused him to retire early. So that's very painful, and it was a shame to see Stannard leave the sport. I would have loved to have seen him in an early season, wet and windy classic when he was like 37 or something. Chris Lawless has also moved over to Team Total Direct Energy, but I'm not sure that will phase Ineos too much. The big news for transfers were the riders coming in, and it's crazy because they're all so similar in style and in level in my mind, and they are Richie Port, Adam Yates, Dani Martinez, and Laurens de Plus, all coming over from, I guess, well, Martinez is younger, de Plus is younger, they're both in their early 20s. Adam Yates is a bit older, and then Port is older again. I think he's 34 or 35. They're the four riders I'm bundling into the same category. And then there's Thomas Pidcock, the big unknown, coming across from CX and winning Baby Giro, signed to Ineos, and I think he's still going to be able to ride CX for them. But those transfers, Benji, which of those four riders, or let's go through them one by one. What do we think, and how do we think Ineos are going to use those guys?
I think that the five riders itself have a bit of a difference between them regarding age, obviously. Pidcock is a much younger guy, has not proven himself on the top level of road cycling. He has in cyclocross recently, being one of the top three riders in there decently, so congratulations on that. On the road, he has not achieved that peak yet outside of the U23 Giro. And
he did set a hot time on Motorola, though. Yeah, he looks good.
Despite all that, despite him being the younger guy and living more of the potential, somehow him and Martinez are the ones I trust the most of these transfers. And
really,
the reason for that is you've got the Plus, who has been struggling with an injury for the entire season in 2020. I don't know where he is when it comes to his level. I don't know where he can be in 2021 when it comes to his level. He could be back at 2019 level, on which he was one of the stronger super domestiques at the Tour de France, helping out the likes of Kruijswijk on Val Thorens and such. And
is
if you look at, correct. Adam Yates, I don't know what to expect from him. I really don't know. I don't feel like he's up there to lead a Grand Tour. And perhaps that might make a few UK people sad, but I just don't see it. And therefore, I think that he's going to end up more in a domestique role. But it just feels weird having a Yates in a domestique role. I don't know. It just doesn't work like that in my mind for some reason. And then you've got Richie Port, which is perhaps the one with the most experience regarding actual domestiquing in the past for Ineos, Sky back in the days. And he was planning to be a super domestique the moment he signed last year for Ineos this year. But since then, he got a podium at the Tour de France. So does that change things? I think you're going to say yes. I don't know. I think that despite all that, he might still be mainly in a role that is going to be a domestique for another leader in the team, because he's one of the older guys. He's one of the more experienced guys. But I think that we're going to see the younger riders again take over that tiny bit more like the last few years and are going to step forward in Ineos as well. I've said it before, Sivakov is the guy I've got my eyes on in Ineos in 2021. And it's not because I'm a Sivakov fan. It's because I feel like he has untapped potential in 2020. And Martinez, one of the riders I haven't spoken about yet, he's a bit of a wild card for me because he was great at Dauphine regarding a GC. He obviously won that eventually after a crash with a few of the actual all-out favorites like Roglic. I think that if that crash didn't happen and if they all finished the race, Roglic would have likely have won the Dauphiné, but you never know. You can't really 100% say that, but it's more likely than Martinez taking over on that final monstrous stage that we saw. But outside of that, he's got the heart of a warrior. He's an awesome rider to watch.
He crashed
and I hope we can see a lot of him. Yep, he crashed a lot, that's true. But it's kind of hard to judge it on 1 year, though, because I feel like there's lots of riders that crashed quite a few times in 1 year, but then for the rest of their career are pretty secure on that, because Martinez's crashes might have been just bad luck. It's not like he's had 5 years in a row where he crashed in every single race. So I think we can give him the benefit of the doubt on that for now.
So Adam Yates, 28 years old. He's going to turn 29 mid-season. He's come second in the Dauphiné. He's come second in Tirreno in 2019, fourth in the Tour de France in 2016. He won the UAE Tour this year in 2020, way back before COVID was even a thing. He won the UAE Tour. It was a thing, actually, but it just hadn't changed our lives yet. He dropped Pogacar and put a minute into Pogacar and Lutsenko up Jebel Hafid. And he won that stage. I remember that stage well. And he won GC overall at UAE Tour. Then he went to the Dauphiné. And this is like the story of the Yates career, right? It's these really high peaks. And you're like, wow, this guy, he's dropping the best climbers in the world and putting time into them. Dauphiné, anonymous. Then Tour de France, stage 2 in Nice, he goes clear with Hirschi and Alaphilippe. And then he took the yellow jersey for, I think, 4 stages. Yeah, 4 stages. And then ended up coming 9th on GC. So, I don't know. Maybe Ineos think he's got some untapped potential. I'm not sure with the time trialing. I haven't really looked into his time trialing, if I'm honest. But yeah, he's got that 4th on GC in the Tour de France in 2016, back when he was 24 years old. That was, I guess, behind Quintana and Bardet. I still wouldn't be putting, like you, Benji, I wouldn't be putting my eggs in the Adam Yates basket for the Tour de France unless he showed overwhelming dominance. I mean, the problem with him is he could go out and win like Paris-Nice. He could go and win Catalunya or Dauphiné or Tirreno. He could win that, sort of like Yates, correct me if I'm wrong, so his brother won Tirreno this year, or 2020, and then you put all your eggs in the basket for him in the Tour de France, and he just doesn't even come like top 5 or something. So Yates, I would be using as a super domestique in the Tour de France. We'll pick that team for Ineos later. Martinez, kind of the same, hasn't shown the consistency, particularly in a 3-week stage race. Can't be going in with him, but I would be using him as a domestique. Richie Port, I would use as a co-captain because he's just so experienced. He showed his best ever level, I think, last year. And if he keeps that level and with the additional time trialing, I was pretty impressed with his time trial, actually. I mean, yeah, it came 3rd or something, same time as Dumoulin in the Planche de Belfi time trial, and was like 12, 15 seconds behind Pogacar on the climb itself. In that TT, De Plus, I mean, you know probably more than this, but yeah, Benji, it's impossible. It's been really conflicting information
Yeah.
about what's happened with him. He's good. When's he going to be riding? Oh, he's not riding at all for this year. Was it weird? Like, was there some sort of were people kind of actually expecting him to be riding last year, and then it just didn't happen?
Yeah, because it just kept getting delayed and postponed and postponed, and you got to keep in mind that people start thinking things, and the fact that his transfer was already announced, people started pulling the card of, well, they're perhaps punishing him for transferring, which is something that quite a few teams have done. I think Caleb Ewan wasn't sent to the Tour de France in the past because of that. But I don't fully remember that story. But that's definitely a thing that happens in cycling, while being a bit of a taboo, of course, because they're obviously not going to say that they're doing it because of that. Now, his injury was actually a thing that existed, and he struggled with that a lot. He came back in the Belgian national championships and just wasn't there. He was like one of the earlier people to drop from the elite group, and he should be able to hold on for much longer in a decent form. In a decent form. I'm not saying at top form. At top form, he would have been able to compete for the race, but in a decent form, he should be able to be up there at least. And
Yeah,
he
he's
was
done well at
nowhere near.
Bank, right? Like, he's not just
Yep.
a climber.
Yep. Exactly. And it was also not the top field that was there at the Belgian Championships. So yeah, it just wasn't a good year, and it wasn't really that illogical after all these struggles with injuries. So I give him a benefit of the doubt for the 2021 season, but I also wouldn't put my eggs in his basket, knowing that it's so unclear what his form is going to be once he gets to the races and such.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and also, I mean, it's not a limb. It's not a limb. They got the highest salary in all cycling. But on paper, Ineos don't have a clear leader for any of the Grand Tours unless they send, say, Bernal, if he comes back from his injury, they send him to the Giro. Obviously, then he's clear leader. But on paper, they have the least clarity about who is their GC leader for the Tour de France. I think since almost maybe Wiggins and Froome back in the day. And then it was still Wiggins on paper. But if throughout their roster, which is littered with question marks, which I'm going to go through in a second, if all those riders actually go back to the level that they've shown previously, or if they're younger, actually reach their potential, then 2021 could be the most dominant season for Ineos in their history, winning multiple one-week races, winning at least 2 Grand Tours is possible for them, and I kind of almost expect from them, actually. So let's run through some of the question marks. I'm going to do a quick fire, and then Benji, just interject whenever you can. Andre Amador, great domestique, but he's 34 years old. Is he going to have that same level next year? Egan Bernal, for a team with marginal gains as their philosophy, bit unusual that for their star Tour de France winner, they didn't realise that he had a sort of an asymmetry with his legs, and he ended up developing scoliosis, in his words, back in October last year. And is he going to be, I mean, he's back training those apocalypse rides 35 hours a week. He's not on the Tim Kerrison program. Is Bernal going to be back to sort of 2018, 2019 level, or is he going to have further issues in 2021, or is he going to be recovering? Carapaz, the only rider without any question marks, El Jaguar de Tulcan. Castroviejo, also 33. Lawrence de Plus, 25, but coming off that injury. Rowan Dennis, is he going to be focusing justifiably on the Olympics bid and not going to be able to help out in a lot of the races, or are they going to try and use him as a GC rider? Eddie Dunbar coming off an injury as well last year. Felipe Ganna, there are no question marks with Ganna. Tao Gegenhardt, was it all a mirage at the Giro last year, or is he actually the real thing and should be vying for Tour de France leadership? Sebastian Enau, didn't show too much, I don't think, last week. Kwiatkowski, he's in talks for extensions, but is he really going to be able to compete in a lot of the classics races and monuments and actually win a monument, which he would pick up here and there like you would for Ineos in 2017 or 18, or those days past him? Dani Martinez, can he show that consistency? Moscon re-signed very quietly for another 1-year extension, 26 years old. I mean, no one likes him. really, because he doesn't seem to be a nice guy. But you got to accept that the guy is crazy talented. Otherwise, Ineos, he wouldn't be on their roster, right? So he's very versatile. Can he get back to his previous 2018 form? Pidcock, what can he show? 21 years old. Port, is he just going to be a domestique? Or is he going to actually be a GC leader, despite what he's been saying? Puccio, 31, he's probably going to be consistent. Brandon Rivera and Ivan Sosa, very disappointing Vuelta of Spaniards. They need to step up next year as a domestiques in the mountains in one of the Grand Tours and probably some one-week races. They need to be counted upon. Are they going to get back to the level that they've, well, at least Sosa's shown previously? Luke Rowe, solid as a rock. He's going to be on the Tour de France team. No question marks for him ever. Carlos Rodriguez, 19, Spaniard. Is he going to improve when he gets into his 20th year? He doesn't really have to be honest. Sivakov, injuries through crashes last year. Is he actually their best GC candidate? Is his time trial too much of an issue? Geraint Thomas, 34, turning 35 by the Tour de France next year. It's quite old for a GC leader. And the crashes, etc. Is he really able to climb with the big boys, Pogačar and Roglic, or is his TT ability able to make up for it? Dylan Van Baarle, 28 years old, no question marks for him. And Adam Yates, how will he integrate? What's his GC? Is he going to be domestique? Is he going to be consistent enough? Who knows how Ineos will use him? Anything you'd like? That was a long list. Sorry, Benji. I've had that on my mind for a long time. Anything you'd like to add to them or disagree with me about?
I agree with everything except for one thing, and that's potentially Sivakov's ITT skills, because in 2020 we didn't see any because, he crashed every time. So that's a bit of a bummer. In 2019, he was able to get top 10s in time trials and such, so I trust him to be able to do well in that. Top 20 in Giro time trials and such as well, and that was not even a good Giro for him because, I think he also had something happen during the race there, so in the end, he got 9th in that Giro, but also top 24, top 20 in time trial. So I don't really feel any scare towards his time trial capabilities towards other GC riders, and I think it's only better than in 2019 for sure. So yeah, I think that last year he was the strongest together with Bernal, of course, at the Dauphiné. Bernal had a weak moment at one of the mountain stages, I think it was Grand Colombier, and on that same mountain stage, Sivakov just left him and went for his own in the last kilometer, and that was probably something they agreed on because Bernal said afterwards that they did, and to me that
if
was
they
a
say
moment
it afterwards,
that
it must be true, right?
Yeah, of course. That was a moment that I won't necessarily forget with Sivakov. He crashed on stage 1 of the Tour, which was a bummer because, I expected much of him that Tour de France.
And stage 5 of the Dauphiné, following Felipe.
Yeah, as well. He crashed another 2 times in that first stage as well, I think, of the Tour. So it didn't really go too well, that Tour de France for him, but he stayed in the race. He slowly but surely crept his way up from Lanterne Rouge to not Lanterne Rouge. So that was good for him. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the last spot in GC. Anyway, that's my take on Sivakov as well. But you're right. There's so many question marks in the team that it's unsure to know who's going to be the leader for next year, for this year. Oh my God.
But if all those riders, if just 50% of them hit their peak, Ineos are going to be incredibly strong once again. They were still, all the people talking about the demise of Ineos in 2020, talking about how Ineos, they've really taken a step back. I mean, that's ludicrous. I'm not looking at, by the way, we're always looking at pro cycling stats for the info, but without looking at PCS, off the top of my head, what they won, like 5 Giro stages or more. They won the Giro with Geraint Thomas crashing out. Tour de France was disappointing, but then they went stage hunting, got that stage win with Kwiatkowski, and Carapaz looked strong the whole time. Do they win anything else? I feel like they... Ganna. Ganna was a complete revelation in terms of, yes, we knew he was a top 5 time trialist, but then he stepped up to being just outrageously good. Giro, they won like 6 or 7 stages.
It's crazy.
They won Vuelta a Burgos stage 5, where again Sosa was disappointing in the crosswinds. probably not the World Tour wins they were expecting, and definitely I think people are right in saying they took a step back in certainly the classics and the monuments. Van Baal was kind of their man for Tour of Flanders. They do, without Stannard and co, they have taken a step back in that respect. You know who I'm really excited about on their team, and I wish they'd taken him to the Vuelta, where I think he would have got multiple top 3 stage wins. Ethan Hayter, 22 years old, British rider. He's a climby sprinter. He already got a win at Giro dell'Apennino. I think that was around with Fabio Fellini, who did pretty well in a Vuelta Stage 2. Giro della Toscana, he came third as well. Top 10 in Coppa Sabatini. Good at Settimana Internazionale, Coppa e Bartoli. And second in Memorial Marco Pantani. Sorry, I think that was the one that was behind Fellini. He is a good one-day racer for the future, Ethan Hayter. So mark him down in your little black books. I'd love to see him in a Grand Tour breakaway. He'd be very dangerous, and he's very young as well. Might not be the Tour because they can't afford the spots. But let's talk about now, Benji, what team they take to various races, starting with we'll combine them together. So the cobbled classics, let's bundle it all together because they generally all go to the same race. Remembering, by the way, this is an Olympics year, which affects 2 of their riders majorly, Dennis and Ganna. But Omloop, Ronde van Vlaanderen, who are they sending, Benji, to those races? Gent and Wevelgem. Who's on the team list? We'll kind of do this combined, but you start me off.
I'd, like you say, go for Dylan van Baarle as one of the leaders again in that squad. And I think that Luke Rowe is also one of the riders that would be on that list for me. Perhaps a Ben Swift. I feel like he's more of a Milano Sanremo person because he always seems to get good places there. In Cobble Classics, though, I'm interested to see what they do with Laurens de Plus regarding his goals in 2021, knowing that he has capabilities on the cobbles. Do they use that for cobble races, or do they say, no, you're a super domestique, go ahead and become a super domestique? Outside of that, it's really hard to find too many riders. Owen Doe, he was good at
It's pretty weak, huh? Like
it's horrendous.
It's not like when Quick-Step, like Kwiatkowski. I always talk about Kwiatkowski at Harelbeke, but Kwiatkowski you could throw in these races and he'd kind of do okay. But yeah, it's just the problem is Ganna. Are you putting Ganna in Tour of Flanders, Benji? Is he going to accept being put in that race where there's a high risk of crashing? And then let's combine this with Paris-Roubaix as well. Was Ganna going to accept going there in an Olympic year, just months before the all-important TT race, the race for the TT Gold? I mean, do you think they'll take him? Do you think he'll want to go to Paris-Roubaix? Because didn't he win like Paris-Roubaix Espoirs?
Yes, he did. The thing about those kind of riders is indeed that they need to find a balance between not risking too much, but also just riding races because they're getting paid to do so. And with the likes of Filippo Ganna, his all-out focus is going to be that Olympics. So obviously he's going to be like, well, Roubaix might be pretty dangerous for injuries, like you say. So, yeah, I can't know what goes on in Ganna's mind, but if I was him, I'd be thinking, well, perhaps it's not worth the risk, knowing that he's able to do this in the coming years as well, where there's no Olympics. And because of that, I think that it's more likely going to point towards a non-compete for him. But if you look at the rest of the team, then who do you fill the team with?
I know. He would be their clear leader, right?
Nervaez, he's got decent cobble history at the Koenig still back in the day, but it's nothing amazing either. Like Kwiatkowski, like you say, but is he going to focus on the hill classics instead and not the cobble classics? That's all a possibility. Do you fill it up with the likes of a Leonardo Basso? Amador can do cobbles. That's a possibility. I'd love to see him do that, but Amador is also pretty great when it comes to domestiquing. So are you going to risk his domestique role for a cobble adventure? I'd do it because otherwise you don't have a team at the start of a cobble race. So it's really tough to fill an entire team with Ineos at a cobble race at the moment.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty clear Van Baarle and Luke Rowe and Puccio and Basso, they're going to be on the team. I mean, you can fill them. They're on the team list. Golas too. But then, yeah, who's going to be the out-and-out leader? Dull there. Yeah, De Plus, maybe. I would be taking Hater, see how he goes in a Gent-Wevelgem, just see.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's a good
it's
one.
maybe it's too much for the bigger guys and he needs some more climbing. But just you got to take it, a young guy. He could impress. Like Kwiatkowski's not the biggest guy either. Maybe, and it might depend on what Kwiatkowski wants to do too. If I was Kwiatkowski and I'm not going to get the opportunity to go for a Tour de France stage win again this year, if all things go to plan, then, well, your only race opportunities are going to be in some of those semi-cobble classics or the Brabantse Pijl, etc. Or, Kwiatkowski could win Paris-Roubaix. Like, he has the capability. There's no reason why he couldn't. Like, a lot of things would have to go right, and it's very unlikely, but, like, if he dialed back the clock, it's possible. But, yeah, they're the question marks for Ineos in the cobble classics. And we don't really know what's going on with the discussions with them and Ghana. Ardennes races, and we can put Lombardia in there as well. What team, Benji, are you sending to Liège, Flèche, and Amstel if you're Ineos? I think this is a little bit easier for them, to be honest.
I think so as well. And the concept that we need to keep in mind is also that it's unlikely for Ineos to send GC leaders to their hill classics. I think that one of the riders I would send would be Kwiatkowski. I think he'd be better focusing on hill classics than on the cobble classics, even though I enjoy seeing him on the cobble races. He didn't get too many years where he was able to fight for that aspect of cycling, and perhaps he needs a bit more of that, but I think I trust him more when it comes to the hill classics. The likes of Dunbar, again, don't know what his injury is, but I'd send him there. Sebastian Henao, I don't know.
No,
He's not his brother.
you have to take an hour to the Ardennes, I think.
Yeah.
You still got to put names on the team list.
Yeah, that's true. When it comes to an actual all-out leader, then you start having trouble again because you're starting to think about riders that are also GC leaders, and that's where the difficulty lies for me here. Egan Bernal is not going to focus on the Hill Classics. Carapaz likely not either. These riders could ride an LBL, but it's unlikely, knowing that it finishes in Liège now these days. So that's unlikely. If you look at the rest of the team, Geoghegan Hart, I don't see him doing it. Then we have Daniel Felipe Martinez, perhaps, but I'm not sure that those kind of races all outfit him. It should, though, on paper. He's got a bit of a punch in the last kilometer, and I'd be daring to take the likes of a Martinez to a hill classic to test it out.
Yeah, I would take him.
I don't know what he'll do, though. Would he be good at the likes of a Flèche, you think?
No, I think he's better at Liège than a Flèche. I think he's good at just a long, hilly day, and he can just. Yeah. That's what the stages he's won, right, have been like hard races from the start where there's just long, extended climbs. The Dauphine stage 5, where he gapped Pinot, and then the stage where he beat Camna in the Tour de France, and then some of the Vuelta. He won Colombia, didn't he? And he's won stages there.
Yep.
Anyway, I think Kwiatkowski's their clear leader. We saw in Imola that, yeah, he's not the best. He's maybe not at the level he was in previous years, but I still think he's clearly better than anyone else on this team in the Ardennes. And I think they have to ride for Kwiatkowski. And I think he deserves that, given his commitment to riding as a domestique in the other races. I think Gianni Moscon is their second best rider in a race like Liège. But we don't know where his head's at. We don't. I mean, the races last year, it was a train wreck. I know his father was very unwell, but I think that might have been after some of those races. And it's just not been a great couple of years for him. But he's 26, and I still think he's the second best in those races. Pidcock, probably going to take him too. See how he goes in a Flèche. See how it goes in Amstel. Just see how he goes. Who knows? And yeah, apart from that, Benji, I don't know. I agree with you for Milano San Remo. It's going to be Ben Swift, and I think it should be Ethan Hayter
What do you think about Adam Yates? Because Adam Yates is good at 1 week races, and when it crosses 1 week, it becomes difficult for him. But he's always good at the 1 week races with more hill style races, more hill style stages. I think UAE was the exception to that, but in previous years, the likes of Tirreno and such, he was able to hold on the more hilly parcours. And I think that
No,
Yates
you're
might
right.
be underestimated with Catalunya or those kind of races. Bay Vasco, I don't know what it was, but I remember in his history that those kind of races fitted him well. San Sebastian, he's won that before. Yeah,
Fourth in
Catalunya
Liège.
2019, second in GC,
He
that
came
kind of stuff. Fourth in Liège, yeah.
He came fourth in Liège in 2019. That's not that long ago. And I agree, you can't protect every GC leader and say you're going to have a protected schedule. Bernal, Carapaz, Thomas, Geoghegan Hart, yeah, sure. Sivakov, okay, those five. But Adam Yates is going to have to get amongst it, and not all those guys can do well at the Tour and the Grand Tour. So they want to, if I'm Ineos, I'm wanting to get my value for money by getting these guys I've signed results elsewhere too. So you're right, Benji. I think you send Yates to the Ardennes, and he's shown he can do well at Liège. And I think Ineos will have a stronger Ardennes squad overall in 2021 than they did in 2020. Now, let's talk about their Grand Tour teams. Giro, I mean, I'm about to have a hot take, Benji. I'm not taking Bernal to the Tour de France, and I take him to the Giro with Ganna and Dennis, and I don't know who else. And I send Carapaz, Geoghegan Hart, and Port to the Tour de France with Thomas. So I don't know if that's outrageous or whether it actually makes sense. I don't know if the Giro parcours has actually been released yet, so I might look stupid if it's got 150 kilometers of time trialing because Venier wants Ganna to win the Giro d'Italia GC. But if it's got Stelvio style stages, like if it had the same parcours as last year, then why wouldn't you take Bernal to the Giro? What's your take on that?
I think that's not a bad take, actually. The only issue I see with that is the reputation aspect. It's Ineos, they want the Tour de France as their main goal, and as a consequence, they're likely going to throw everything they have on the Tour de France and try and put the leaders that they don't trust fully for the likes of the Tour de France into other things. He's still a previous Tour de France winner in a year that the most difficult mountain stages were also semi-cancelled, the last two. As a consequence, there was a lot decided by time trials as well with that Alaphilippe time trial. That was a hilly time trial though, so that changes things. I think now we've got way more time trial kilometers and also in general more flatter time trial kilometers, and because of that, it becomes harder and harder for the likes of Bernal. Bernal's not a bad TTer though, but he's not with the riders that are likely as competitors. If Roglic starts, which is extremely likely if he's in a healthy condition, then he's not going to be able to compete with Roglic on a flat time trial. And the likes of Pogacar, we haven't spoken about that yet, but Pogacar, if he does what he did in the Tour de France 2020 again in the future in time trials, then he's going to be tougher to handle for the likes of an Egan Bernal in Grand Tours. And it kind of goes for the rest as well. We saw Carapaz do decent in the time trial for La Vuelta, but it also wasn't an extremely top time trial by him, but he kept his grounds towards the riders that would normally bash his head in when it comes to time trials. So that is
But
that is
again,
definitely
it was a
something.
hilly TT. It was still a hilly
Yeah,
TT.
it was still
And
a hilly TT.
yeah, I think it's not just the Tour de France Planche de Belfi stage. Like Pogacar has shown even the Slovenian champs ITT. I think he's going to replicate that level on the flat. I don't think it was a one-off, that he is a very, very
Same.
good time trialist. Nor Geraint Thomas. I think he is
Yep.
world-class on the flat as a TT rider and up there with Pogacar as the second best or equal as the sort of GC TT riders in the world. Pogacar probably a bit better overall if we have a climb in the parcours, but on the flat, Dumoulin, Pogacar, Thomas, all pretty similar in my view. But I think Olympics may not actually play as big a role in this because even if there is an enforced quarantine, that means you can't do the Tour and the Olympics. I think that will just unfortunately mean that these guys can't do the Olympics. I think Bernal, Thomas. Maybe Thomas might agree something different because Ineos can say, well, we've got other guys we can take. But if Ineos want Bernal to do the Tour, Bernal will do the Tour. Same with Pogačar and Roglic. They're not getting paid millions and millions of euro every year to go and skip the Tour de France or defend their title to ride for, yes, their country, but their country doesn't pay the bills. So just to put that issue to bed from my perspective. But who would you take to the Giro, Benji? I know we're shooting in the dark here because we don't know the parcours exactly, but just assuming the Giro parcours is something similar to last year.
I think you would have to choose between Carapaz and Bernal. I'm not sure who to go for because I think that they're relatively equal in time trial capabilities, and in a non-injured year, Bernal is to me the better climber. The question is, can he come back from this injury at a proper level? Because it's not an injury that is just, it's done. No, it's not that simple. It's something that will need to be reviewed after a few races and seen if the injury is fully gone and whether he needs to change something along the way, stuff like that. I think I would be sending... It highly depends on the Giro parcours, but I think I'd send Bernal to the Giro, like you say, or Carapaz. It's really hard. The thing is, I'm going to be picking...
Can they do the double?
I don't think... Well, I think that...
Why don't you send them to both? Carapaz did the Tour this year and then backed up for the Vuelta, and the racing of the Tour was good for him, it seemed. Why not go Giro with Bernal as leader, Carapaz backup leader, and then reverse it for the Tour?
Yes, but if you reverse it for the Tour, what are you going to do with the likes of a Geraint Thomas there as well? Because
but for the Tour, they have to go. The only way they can beat Pog and Rog is with multiple leaders. They can't just go. They're not going to go to the Tour de France and say, Geraint, love the TT. It's where all our eggs are in Geraint Thomas' basket. They can't do that because he's going to get gapped on the climbs by them.
Yep.
He might not even put that much time into Pogačar on the TTs, to be honest. And I think they're going to be putting a fair bit of time. I'm talking even on stage 2 on the Bermuda Britannia, Roglic could put with bonus seconds time into actual 10 to 15 seconds plus into Thomas and multiply that across a few of the other stages, etc. Then you got the actual genuine mountain stages. So I think for the Tour they got to have a multi-leader strategy. That's why I say, just like with sort of the Giro last year, I would take their big talented guys and I would take them to at least 2 Grand Tours during the year each, and then hope that talent rises to the top, or hope that one guy's firing. Because maybe Carapaz is firing in the Giro and Bernal's still working himself back into form. But then maybe doing the Giros really helps him for the Tour. Now, maybe COVID will render what I'm saying irrelevant, because if you're playing it really safe for the Tour, you want to have all your riders stay in France, do a French preparation for the Tour de France, and same with, you need to have your riders doing an Italian season with Tirreno and Milan-San Remo and then the Giro d'Italia. But Richie Port, I think, has to go to the Tour de France. Sorry, Benji, mark it down in your notes, guys, by the way. Benji refused to give me a straight answer on who he would take to the Giro as leader, so that y'all couldn't roast him and only I'd cop the flack for my hot take in 6 months or 5 months. But didn't go unnoticed for me. I'm just going to write down in my notes here that he chose Brandon Rivera as their leader and with Cameron Worth as the backup.
Yeah, that's the take.
But moving on to the Tour de France, again, I've already said it, Benji. Do you disagree with what I've said about co-leaders being their only option, so they can try and 1-2 and attack Roglic? Because that's what I would do to Jumbo-Visma, even if they got Roglic in yellow and they're looking imperious. If you attack them enough, that can quickly crumble and all of a sudden they're not looking so strong. So, yeah, how would you approach the Tour if you're Ineos?
I agree with your co-leadership. I'm not sure how you would balance that perfectly, because if you go to the Tour de France with the likes of Thomas, Port, you've got Gegenhardt, like you said earlier, Carapaz, you've got perhaps a Bernal that comes off the Giro. If you do the Giro, then you've got 5 riders that could be a GC leader at a certain point. I think there needs to be some hierarchy in place for when things go south, because you can't be in a mountain stage and just have 5 people on the same level, because then you won't have anyone to respond. Because, yeah, the other 3 riders are going to be Luke Rowe. You're going to have Kwiatkowski, who will be domestique, and the third rider will be also a domestique that perhaps is a good domestique, but once it becomes an elite group, and you've got the likes of a Wout van Aert smashing the pedals in an elite group, together with Tom Dumoulin pacing for Roglic. I don't know, it's an example here.
Or Micah,
Then
on a proper mountain stage, Micah, who's been resting for 3 days for Pogacar.
Then you need to be able to make a decision on what you're going to do to react to that. You can't just sit up with 5 riders and expect one of them to fall through and then decide, that guy's weak. Well, it's too late because he's dropped already, so he can't help you anymore. So there needs to be some hierarchy in place. I think that if you have a leader at the Giro, then he's likely going to be less of a leader at the Tour. So if you send Bernal and Carapaz to the Giro, then they're likely going to be more domestique in the Tour de France, in my eyes. And therefore, I wonder what they're going to do with Gegenhardt, because he won the Giro, yes, but I don't have confidence in him as a GC rider after that Giro. And perhaps that's just me, but I think that I just don't trust him to just be leader of a team like this yet. I need to see more, and I need to see more Grand Tours in which he can fight at that top Grand Tour GC elite group level to be able to see a potential future Tour de France winner in him.
You put Sivakov over Tao Gegenhardt?
I do. I put Sivakov over Gegenhardt because I think Sivakov, in the form that he was before he crashed in 2020, was one of the best GC riders in the world at that moment. And I believe that he's got the abilities, and he's proven already in Dauphine last year that he can be up there with the elite guys. Whether he can do that in a full Grand Tour is yet to be seen. So I put Gegenhardt a bit under Sivakov for that. I put Sivakov a bit higher. I think that Sivakov is more going to be the surprise of the season and not necessarily the rider that we expect things from. We shouldn't expect things from Sivakov, in my opinion. I heard that he wanted to focus on the Olympics as well. I don't know under what flag he's going to ride, because I don't know how that works these days with Russia having that ban as well. So we'll see how that works, and we'll see what he focuses on regarding that Olympics then. But knowing that, I still have Gegenhardt and Sivakov initially as the initial setup under the likes of a Geraint Thomas, who would be higher up. And I've said before that I don't trust Geraint Thomas in Grand Tour GCs because, one, he crashes a lot, and two, I thought his time trial was overrated last year, but I clearly was wrong on that aspect. I've already dished out a public apology of that last year to all British fans. And
he's not a top-level climber. That's the problem.
Yeah, but he doesn't need to be for the Tour de France 2021. I think there's one mountain stage.
I think the difference is, between in his climbing is problematic. Enough that the TT is not enough, because say his TT nets out losing time on, say, Ventoux or whatever. Say the TT nets it out, he's still going to be losing bonus seconds on Mur de Bretagne and some of the punchy finishes maybe, or even if he stays with the group in the mountain stages, he's still going to lose bonus seconds to Pog and Rog. We're just assuming based on what he did in 2020, and I think that means that he's great to have in the team. He's got those TTs, and he could be up on them after stage 5, but he's going to get attacked later in the Tour de France, and that's why you need other guys. Dani Martinez, again, I don't know what they're going to do with him.
Me neither.
I'd probably take him to the Tour de France, to be honest, because he's got an okay time trial. He's pretty good, the best Colombian time trialist. Tao Gegenhardt, yes, I agree with you. I think the Giro win was a bit of a mirage in the most unusual year ever, but I still think he is entitled to go to the Giro and defend that title, but not be given outright leadership on the road, just like he wasn't at the Giro in 2020. In fact, they only started really seriously riding for him very late in the last week. I think their TT riders, Dennis and Gunnar, will go to the Giro once again as preparation for the Tour de France, preparation for the Olympics, pardon me, and they'll obviously be skipping the Tour because of the TT at Tokyo. But yeah, it's a lot of us speculating, and I think that's. I mean, I want to hear from you all in the YouTube comments, or send us a message, or tweet at us. Like, where do you see this team? Because still, we've tried to answer some of these questions about them, or say what we might do. It's difficult to say without a definitive Giro parcours. And then the Vuelta, well, they'll just send whoever wants to go. I mean, in a normal season,
I disagree.
In a normal season, Ineos at the Vuelta will just be like, who wants to go, and who does it make sense for them? But okay, what do you think someone's going to target it?
I feel like they need to send the youngsters again, like every single team does when it comes to potentially having a first Grand Tour. You've got Carlos Rodriguez. He was good on Laguna Zanella in Burgos in 2020, the stage that Evenepoel won. He ended up with climbers that are relatively decent, so the likes of De La Cruz and such. So on paper, I'd be calling him for potentially giving an opportunity for him, but also I'd be thinking about the likes of a Pidcock for his first Grand Tour in La Vuelta, and for the rest, I'd be looking at someone that came of the Tour de France and perhaps was domestique there, but also Adam Yates perhaps, because you've got less time trials in the Vuelta. He's not a terrible time trial, but he's also not a very good one. And as a consequence, I don't trust him in a Giro or Tour de France because of that. We haven't spoken about him regarding the Giro and the Tour de France, and therefore I'm looking at La Vuelta, on which I believe he can achieve more. But the problem with Yates for me is always that 3-week aspect. When it comes to races, he just is good in the initial aspects. He can hold on for quite a bit, but once it becomes a game of recovery between stages, then it seems to become an issue for Adam Yates, and that's where I see his issue. But I think in La Vuelta, that is the Grand Tour that fits him the most on paper.
That's a really good point. I think Tour de France as a domestique, and then Vuelta as one of the leadership options. I think that's makes the most sense for Yates, as well as some of the Ardennes races. And listen, if he's on form and it all clicks, he could get their biggest results of the year. If he picks up a podium at Liège or something, or I don't know, who knows what he could do. Maybe a 1-week World Tour level race, and then he also wins La Vuelta. That's a very good return on. I'm not sure what they signed him to, but that would be really good, and he's capable of doing that. So Benji, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Ineos in 2021, are they going to win more than the 19 races they won in 2020, including like 7 Giro stages and the Giro GC?
I think it's going to be hard to win more at the Giro itself, but outside of the Giro, I think they've got more of a wider field of big guns to compete with. The problem is that they're not too diverse on that. They can do well at a specific set of races, but good for them that that specific set of races is also the biggest part of the season. So I think they're going to win more than 19 races during the season, but I think that it might be carried a little by the time trialists as well again. The likes of Agana and such, he's going to win time trials throughout the season. That is going to deliver 3 wins for Ineos if he's on the form that we all expect him to be on. Dennis, he might be back at the top of time trial together with Ghana. And if he does that, then they're going to get wins from that. And we're looking at Kwiatkowski for the Hill Classics, Adam Yates. I don't see them beating the likes of a Hirschi and the Alaphilippe and such in those races. I don't believe in that. I believe in second places, third places, fourth places in those races, though. So that's an option. When it comes to Grand Tours, I expect them to win at least one of them. I think it's most likely going to be I think it's most likely going to be. It's hard. I want to say La Vuelta because I know that Pogacar is
They
going to
never
go
do.
all
They
out.
never do well at the Vuelta when they send like their random riders.
Yeah,
It's
but
always been a disaster.
mm,
Like Froome obviously did
yeah,
well when he went, but they like when they sent Gegenhardt and De La Cruz and co. I remember that was no good.
yeah, but we got to keep in mind that Pogacar is going to be one of the favorites again for the Tour de France with Roglic, and I find it hard to believe that one of the riders on Ineos will be able to compete with
El
them in the
Hapadakut!
next stages.
I can't believe you're disrespecting Carapaz, man.
Sorry for the Jaguar, but I can't see him beat Pogacar on a mountain stage if Pogacar is in Tour de France form of 2020. So that's going to be troublesome. And Pogacar's getting older and is going to likely even grow a tiny bit again. You don't know that. He's going to gain experience, and that's going to play into his style of riding.
Team's
And
better.
we're not talking about we here, but we're talking about the competition for Ineos. And I think it's going to be really difficult to win a Grand Tour for them. And with the likes of, I don't want to say it, but Evenepoel in Grand Tours, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, you're talking about Evenepoel on a podcast about Ineos on Grand Tour stage. The man hasn't done a proper mountain stage in his career. Well, it's unlikely that he's going to be bad at them. It's likely that he's going to be good at them. And I would not put all out money on him if he was at the start of the Tour de France on winning it. But he'd have a possibility of top fiving it, knowing the parcours. And if he was at the Giro last year, I hate to break it to people, but I really believe that he could have been on the podium of the Giro if he was there. And
Mate,
I think that
would have won it by 10 minutes.
Yeah, I don't want to say it because I'm Belgian and people are going to say I'm biased, but he would have won it. Anyway, your turn.
Yeah. We're going to get people accusing us of a lot of bias. Obviously, I'm well known for being a doubter about Remco Evenepoel. Yeah, it's Ineos. It's weird. Like they're the most. They got the biggest salary and the biggest money in the sport. I still like a lot of their riders. Like I know people don't like them as a team. I really like Carapaz. I want to see what Hayter can do. Obviously, Richie Port. I'd like to see. I mean, I'm hoping he gets an opportunity next year, despite what he's saying. Yeah, I like Egan Bernal. He seems like a nice guy too. Luke Rowe, I love seeing in the classic. Sivakov, I'm really keen to see. What I disagree with, though, and why I don't think they're going to exceed their 19 wins of 2020 is because I don't believe Dave Brailsford when he says, we've changed philosophy now. I love just stage hunting in Grand Tours and just seeing what happens on GC. I think that was a bit of revisionist history because, A, Thomas crashed and they wouldn't have raced that way in the Giro had it not been for Thomas crashing. And then they're like, oh, Tal, see how you go, mate. And then he was up there and they're like committed to it late in the third week. Also, if they had Pogacar, if they had Prime Froome, they wouldn't be saying that either for the Tour de France. But the fact is, they don't have the strongest rider on paper. They've got a time trialist who's really up there in the TTs, who crashes a lot and probably isn't up there in the mountains. They've got high altitude climbers. They've got an all-round good rider with a slightly weak TT, Richard Carapaz. So they don't have that really dominant rider who they can just set up train for and, crush the race. So that's why Brailsford was saying, oh, well, we're going to do things differently. So I think they will be more aggressive with multiple riders in the Tour, etc. I don't think that will yield like numerous stage wins through going into breakaways, etc. But I still, and nor will it really help them in the Ardennes or the Cobble Classics. And we've already detailed how they're going to struggle there. We think Adam Yates maybe could pick up 3 to 4 wins all at World Tour level, but I don't think they're going to win over 19 races next year.
But
I could be eating my heart.
I think that one thing we need to keep in mind is those 19 victories. That is extremely low for Ineos in the last few years, and that is because obviously the COVID season was so condensed with lots of races being cancelled. So a lot of these race predictions with how many victories can they achieve will depend fully on the fact of, are there going to be races that are going to be cancelled? how many compared to 2020? Are we going to see more races than 2020? Then it's obviously logically more likely for them to win more than 19 races if they've got more races to win. So that's one of the aspects that we need to keep in mind a bit as well.
I think we'll see about the same, really. And even if some of the smaller races are on, Ineos might be reluctant to send their riders to them. So, for example, in 2019, they won three races in Australia at the Herald Sun Tour. That's obviously not on. They had the Tour of the Yorkshire. Is that going to be on in 2021? I'm not sure. Tour of Norway.
Maybe.
These smaller races, are they going to be on? Obviously, I think the Grand Tours and the big ones are going to be on like in 2020, but I think we're going to unfortunately see a very similar race calendar this time in the correct order in 2021. I don't think we're going to have all the lovely smaller races. Now, maybe Hayter will clean up the full Italian season and then that yields 6 or 7, so I proved wrong in that respect. But yeah, they won 26 in 2019, but that was padded, I think, from a lot of those races that I don't think will be on either. But this has been a round hour just about. We don't want to speak too much about Ineos because we get accused of... I mean, they are the most interesting team, I think, from my perspective because of all the question marks. But name, Benji, the most unexpected thing you think will happen from this team in 2021. The thing that no one... So that you can look back and tweet about it when it happens and clip this part and say, I am a genius when it happens. And if it doesn't happen, no one will remember that you said it.
Pavel Sivakov will be finishing second at the Tour de France in 2021. And he's going to be the best Ineos rider in the Tour de France.
Gianni Moscon will podium a monument in 2021.
It's not a bad take, to be honest. It's possible.
I know. It's like
if he can refrain himself from throwing bikes beforehand, he's got an option.
I feel like I'm wishing. Yeah, I think that. I mean, he's got a really good chance of doing it. To be honest, if he focuses on Lombardia, I'd probably be a top 5 favorite. I mean, Fuglsang won it last
Championships.
World Championships is in Italy, right? Or is that European Championships?
Flanders, man, come on, dude.
Oh,
it's in the best place on earth.
Sorry. It's at your house. Sorry. All right, I'm obviously getting forgetful. Tweet at us or comment down below your hot take for what you think could happen with Ineos, for Ineos in 2021 so that you can get the massive kudos for it when it happens this year. Comment down below if you're surprised that Bernal is not being coached by Tim Kerrison despite what's happened in the previous year. And comment down below who you think is going to be their GC leaders for the respective Grand Tours. That's all from us. And we'll be bringing out another poddy team preview in the next couple of days. Ciao.